There's a piece of land in the Arizona desert that Kurt Russell still owns. An acre, overlooking one of the most famous graveyards in the American West. He didn't buy it. He didn't inherit it. A friend gave it to him, decades ago, as a joke that turned out to be one of the most quietly moving gestures in Hollywood history. That friend was Val Kilmer. For most of his career, Kilmer lived inside two competing legends. One said he was one of the most gifted actors of his generation, a Juilliard-trained obsessive who disappeared into every role he touched. The other said he was a nightmare, arrogant, combative, the kind of actor directors warned each other about. Both stories followed him for 30 years. And after Kilmer's death in April 2025, it was Kurt Russell, his co-star, his closest collaborator, and by his own account, one of the people who knew him best, who finally stepped forward and set the record straight. Now, at 75, still working, still sharp, still turning up in new projects almost every year, Russell has spent the last couple of years doing something he rarely does, talking in real detail about what Val Kilmer was actually like. And the picture he paints is nothing like the one Hollywood spent decades circulating. The story doesn't start on Tombstone. It starts a full decade earlier, on the set of a very different movie. In 1983, Russell was working on Silkwood, the Mike Nichols drama starring Cher, Meryl Streep, and Kurt himself. Val Kilmer wasn't in the film. He was 22 years old, freshly out of Juilliard, and hanging around the production because he knew Cher. According to Russell, recounting the memory decades later to Rolling Stone, he could already tell there was something different about the kid. Kilmer hadn't landed his big breaks yet, no Top Gun, no Top Secret, nothing that would make him a household name, but Russell remembered him as unusually serious about the craft, someone who clearly wanted more from acting than most 22-year-olds did. That first impression mattered later, because by the time the two men actually worked together on Tombstone in 1993, Val Kilmer's reputation had changed dramatically, and not for the better. By the early 90s, Kilmer had become one of the most talked-about actors in Hollywood, and not always in a flattering way. He'd worked on Top Gun, Willow, The Doors, and Batman Forever, and stories about his behavior on set had started following him from production to production. Batman Forever director Joel Schumacher would later describe Kilmer, bluntly, as impossible to work with. Other directors and crew members made similar complaints over the years, clashes over creative decisions, difficulty compromising, an intensity that some read as brilliance and others read as arrogance. Some of it, by most accounts, was real. Kilmer took his work seriously to an almost obsessive degree. He didn't just learn a script. He tried to live inside a character, and that level of immersion could make him difficult to be around when the work wasn't going the way he wanted. He had strong opinions and he shared them freely, whether or not anyone had asked for them. Part of what made Kilmer such a lightning rod was the sheer range of his ambition. He wasn't an actor who picked comfortable, repeatable roles. He chased Jim Morrison in The Doors, chased the caped crusader in Batman Forever, chased a corrupt lawyer in The Saint, chased Doc Holliday, a dying, tubercular gunslinger with a philosophy degree and a death wish. Each of those parts demanded a different kind of total immersion, and colleagues who worked with him across different productions have described wildly different experiences, depending on how well his intensity happened to mesh with theirs on a given day. Some directors found him a dream to work with. Others, like Schumacher, found him nearly unmanageable. That inconsistency is part of what made the difficult actor label stick so hard. It wasn't one bad story, it was a pattern of stories, told by different people, across different sets, over the better part of a decade. So when Tombstone's production started falling apart in 1993, adding Val Kilmer to the mix looked, on paper, like a recipe for disaster. Tombstone's behind-the-scenes story is almost as dramatic as anything that ends up on screen. Kevin Jarre, who wrote the screenplay, was originally set to direct the film as well. About a month into shooting, he was fired. Reports at the time, including coverage from Entertainment Weekly, pointed to a script that had ballooned out of proportion to the shooting schedule, along with growing frustration from the studio and cast. Sam Elliott, who played Virgil Earp, later said flatly that he knew within the first 3 days that Jarre wasn't going to be able to pull it off, according to reporting from Slash Film. Enter George P. Cosmatos, the director behind Rambo, First Blood Part 2, who was brought in as an emergency replacement. By multiple accounts, Cosmatos arrived with only about 2 days to prepare before he had to start directing a film that was already a month behind schedule, with sets built, a full cast assembled, and a studio breathing down everyone's neck. That's the environment Kurt Russell stepped into as an unofficial fixer. According to Russell's own account, later confirmed and elaborated on by Kilmer himself, Russell spent his nights during the shoot drawing up shot lists for the following day's work and handing them to Cosmatos to execute. He wasn't credited as a director. He never claimed the title. But by his own admission in a 2006 interview, and by Kilmer's account years later, Russell effectively kept the production from collapsing. That's the chaos Val Kilmer walked into as Doc Holliday. A production without a stable director, a lead actor quietly running the show from behind the scenes, and Kilmer, Hollywood's most talked-about difficult actor, expected to deliver one of the most demanding performances of his career in the middle of it all. Here's where the story stops following the script everyone expected. Instead of clashing, Russell and Kilmer became close. Genuinely close. Not the kind of professional courtesy actors extend to each other for the cameras, but a real friendship built under pressure. In his 2025 interview with Rolling Stone, conducted in the wake of Kilmer's death, Russell didn't dodge the elephant in the room. He acknowledged directly that there had been plenty said over the years about why Kilmer could be difficult. But he followed that up by describing their relationship as tremendously trusting, and said he always found Kilmer's reasoning to be solid whenever it came to decisions about the film. Russell went further, describing the working relationship as a genuine collaboration, the two of them consistently landing on the same instincts about scenes, about pacing, about what the story needed. He said elsewhere that watching Kilmer work was one of the things that made the grueling Arizona shoot bearable. There's a lighter side to the friendship, too. Russell has talked about a trip to Europe during the film's promotional run, where he, Kilmer, and Russell's longtime partner Goldie Hawn spent time together off the clock. By his telling, Kilmer had a rapier-sharp, acidic sense of humor that not everyone appreciated, but that Russell found genuinely funny. Kilmer, for his part, apparently had a nickname for his co-star. He used to call Russell Concrete Head, a reference, Russell has said with a laugh, to how firm and immovable he could be about his own ideas and approach to a scene. It's a small detail, but it says a lot. That's not the shorthand of two actors tolerating each other through a hard shoot. That's the shorthand of people who'd become genuinely close. If there's one story that captures the strange, specific bond between these two men, it's what happened after Tombstone wrapped. Russell told GQ, in a January 2024 interview, that it used to be common practice for actors to exchange gifts once a long shoot ended. Nothing formal, nothing anyone was obligated to do, just something that sometimes happened between people who'd been through a hard production together. Russell wanted to give Kilmer something that actually reflected what they'd built. So he had his driver track down some of Kilmer's actual props from the film, the holster, the gun, the hat, and the chair with Kilmer's name printed on the back, and had them photographed together as a keepsake. Then he added something else. Russell arranged for Kilmer to receive an actual burial plot at Boot Hill Graveyard in Tombstone, Arizona, the real historic cemetery, the same one referenced throughout the film, where a number of genuine Old West outlaws and lawmen are buried. His reasoning, as he explained it to GQ, was rooted in the character. Doc Holliday, dying of tuberculosis for most of the film, was defined by his relationship with death. It was the thing that made him reckless and, in a strange way, fearless. To Russell, giving the man who played Doc Holliday a resting place in a real Old West graveyard felt like the perfect, darkly funny tribute. What Russell didn't know is that Kilmer had been planning something too, without a word of coordination between them. When Russell handed over his gift, Kilmer turned to his own driver and said, essentially, hand it over. What Kilmer had arranged for Russell was an acre of land, overlooking Boot Hill Graveyard. Neither man knew what the other had planned. Neither had discussed it. And somehow, they'd landed on the exact same symbolic idea from opposite directions. A resting place in the ground, and a living view looking down on it. Russell has pointed out the neatness of that contrast himself. Doc Holliday was about death, Wyatt Earp was about life, And somehow that's exactly the metaphor both actors reached for independently when it came time to say thank you to each other. Russell wasn't the only one putting this friendship on the record. Years before his death, Val Kilmer did the same thing, in his own words, on his own website. In August 2017, after years of persistent rumors that Russell had essentially directed Tombstone in all but title, Kilmer decided to address it directly in a lengthy blog post. He didn't dodge the question or offer a diplomatic non-answer. He wrote that Kurt was solely responsible for Tombstone's success, full stop, no question. Kilmer described watching Russell sacrifice his own energy and screen time to hold the production together, working late into the night on shot lists, putting in what Kilmer called tremendous effort on editing, all while the studio refused to extend the schedule to make up for the month lost to Kevin Jarre's firing. He was careful to note that Cosmatos really did direct the film. The credit wasn't a fiction, but that it was Russell's relentless behind-the-scenes work that kept the whole thing from falling apart. Kilmer even revealed that the two of them briefly lived together during filming. When Goldie Hawn wasn't in town, Kilmer would crash on Russell's couch so the two of them could squeeze extra time out of each night working on the script and the schedule. He joked that he ended up with all of Doc Holliday's best lines, and that Russell knew it, and laughed about it every single day anyway. Kilmer closed the post with a line that's stuck with fans ever since. He wrote that everyone on that production cared, but that Kurt put his money where his mouth was in a way very few stars ever do for their cast and crew. Two men. Two separate, unprompted public statements, years apart. Kilmer crediting Russell with saving the film. Russell crediting Kilmer with one of the finest performances he's ever witnessed up close. Neither statement made under the pressure of grief or publicity. Just two actors telling the truth about each other while they both still could. Val Kilmer's health had been declining for over a decade by the time of his death. He was first diagnosed with throat cancer in 2014. Treatment ultimately beat the disease, but it came at an enormous physical cost. Kilmer underwent 2 tracheotomies that permanently affected his ability to speak. When he returned to the screen in 2022's Top Gun, Maverick, reprising his role as Iceman, the production used AI-assisted voice technology to help recreate his voice for a handful of lines. It was a strange, moving kind of comeback. Kilmer back in one of his signature roles, unable to speak in the voice audiences remembered him by, but showing up anyway. Russell told Rolling Stone about the last time he saw his friend, roughly 3 years before Kilmer's death. By then, talking had become genuinely difficult for Kilmer. But Russell said he still had wonderful things to say, and still had his sense of humor intact. At one point during that visit, Kilmer looked at him and said, quietly, that maybe he could have been a little nicer to more people over the years. Then he laughed about it. Russell has described that moment as Kilmer being reflective, looking back honestly on a full life and a full career, reputation and all. Russell's own response in that interview was simple. Everybody has all sides to who they are, nobody gets out of this alive, and if anybody deserved to rest in peace, it was Val. Val Kilmer died on April 1, 2025, at the age of 65. His daughter, Mercedes Kilmer, confirmed to the New York Times that the cause was pneumonia, connected to complications from his years of cancer treatment. The tributes arrived almost immediately. Tom Cruise held a moment of silence at CinemaCon. Francis Ford Coppola, Cher, Josh Brolin, and dozens of other actors and directors who'd worked with Kilmer over 4 decades shared memories and condolences. Clips of his most iconic roles, Doc Holliday facing down Johnny Ringo, Jim Morrison, Batman, Iceman, flooded social media almost instantly. And in the days that followed, Russell's January 2024 GQ interview, recorded more than a year before Kilmer's death, with no idea that time was running out, started circulating everywhere. What had originally been a career retrospective suddenly read like something else entirely, a tribute Russell had given his friend without even knowing he needed to. Russell turned 75 in March 2026, and by every account, he's shown no sign of slowing down. He's continued starring in Apple TV's Monarch, Legacy of Monsters, appeared in Taylor Sheridan's new series The Madison for Paramount Plus, and even showed up in a Michelob Ultra commercial that aired during the Winter Olympics and the Super Bowl. In interviews marking the milestone birthday, Russell has talked with characteristic humor about his health, his decades-long relationship with Goldie Hawn, and his early career as a minor league baseball player before an arm injury pushed him fully into acting. But when the subject of Val Kilmer comes up, the tone shifts. Russell isn't just recounting an old colleague's career anymore. He's protecting the memory of someone he clearly considered family. That shift matters, because Russell didn't have to keep talking about Kilmer at all. Plenty of actors let old co-stars fade into the background once a shoot wraps and the press tour ends. Russell has done the opposite. In interview after interview, going back to well before Kilmer's death, he's kept returning to Tombstone and to Kilmer specifically, unprompted, as though the experience of making that film together never really stopped mattering to him. That's a different kind of loyalty than the kind actors usually perform for cameras. It's the kind that shows up consistently, over decades, long after there's any career incentive left to keep the story alive. On paper, this friendship shouldn't have worked. A steady, disciplined Hollywood veteran quietly holding together a collapsing production, paired with an intensely demanding actor whose reputation for difficulty had followed him for a decade. Every ingredient was there for conflict. Instead, it produced one of the most enduring westerns ever made, and a friendship that outlasted the production by more than 30 years. Not because either man was easy, because they trusted each other completely, on set and off, and because both of them were willing to say so publicly, years before anyone needed a eulogy. The burial plot at Boot Hill and the acre of land overlooking it aren't really jokes about death. They're a record of two men who understood each other completely, expressed through the darkest, funniest gift exchange in Hollywood history. Doc Holliday and Wyatt Earp, dying and living, right down to the last gesture. That's the truth Kurt Russell has spent the last 2 years trying to make sure people remember. Not a feud. Not a difficult actor and the co-star who tolerated him. A real friendship, built in the middle of chaos, that neither man ever stopped talking about. If this story moved you, let us know in the comments, and tell us which Val Kilmer performance means the most to you. Doc Holliday, Jim Morrison, Iceman, Batman. We want to hear it. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time. We cover the Hollywood stories that actually matter every single week. See you in the next one. Sources: Rolling Stone, April 2025, GQ, January 2024, The Hollywood Reporter, UPI, IndieWire, The Wrap, and Cowboys and Indians magazine, August 2017, on Val Kilmer's personal blog post, /film, January 2024.